Good evening, everyone, and welcome tonight to our first parent forum of the school year. Tonight we have a wonderful presentation for you titled Cyberbullying and Digital Media Use, What Parents Need to Know. So we're so happy that you could be here tonight, whether it's in person or online, and we did take your feedback at the end of the school year last year, so thank you to all the parents and guardians who submitted different requests for topics, time of the day, preferred day of the week. And so here we are tonight, and we are going to live stream our presentation. And for those of you who may have a few glitches at home or may have to run out to prepare for the snow, no worries. We're going to record it, and we will post it on our website in the weeks to come, so you can view it as many times as you'd like. I'd like to thank our tech department, specifically Jeff Pacer and Jacob Albarella, for helping support this presentation tonight. Our PPS team and certainly our district for supporting this, and especially our social worker, our outreach social worker, Melissa Brindamore, for reaching out to our esteemed speaker tonight. So I have the pleasure to introduce Dr. Stephanie Fredrick. She is from UB. Dr. Fredrick is an associate professor and associate director of the Dr. Jean M. Alberti Center for the Prevention of Bullying, Abuse, and Social Violence at the University at Buffalo, State University of New York. Broadly, her research aims to investigate the relations among bullying behavior and social-emotional well-being among youth, and how schools, families, and communities can prevent bullying and promote protective factors and resiliency among our youth. Dr. Fredrick is especially interested in school-based preventative and proactive factors, including social support, school climate, and social-emotional learning practices. More recently, her research has focused on cyberbullying prevention, media use, and digital citizenship skills. Another focus of her research is on evidence-based assessment of social-emotional behavior, including universal social-emotional screening in schools, which is becoming a more popular and even more important assessment that schools continue to research and look into. We also want to thank Dr. Fredrick very much for allowing us to record her presentation tonight so that you could view it again in the weeks to come. So thank you so much, Dr. Fredrick. We're so happy to have you here tonight. And without further ado, Dr. Fredrick. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me here this evening. I know that it is, these evenings can be so hectic, especially with apparently the really severe winter storm that we're about to have very early in the season this year. So thanks so much for your attention this evening. So I am going to talk tonight about cyberbullying and digital media use, particularly ways to promote healthy online behavior, as well as preventing our children from being involved in cyberbullying, and or what we can do if our children are involved in cyberbullying or experience victimization online. Before I go into the presentation, I just want to just take a couple minutes and just talk a little bit about the Alberti Center for Bullying Abuse Prevention, which is the center that I help to direct at UB. And so we are housed within the Graduate School of Education at UB. Dr. Amanda Nickerson is the director, and I joined the center in 2019 as the associate director. As a center at a research-intensive university, we sort of do two main things. So the first sort of aim or goal of the center is that we conduct rigorous research and look at research and conduct studies on bullying prevention, school violence prevention, and other aggressive behaviors among children and adolescents. And the second thing that we do is we try to disseminate that research. And so we disseminate that research through a variety of different means. One of those means being trainings and presentations like what I'm doing this evening. We also we just work a lot with other school districts, other community organizations. We work a lot with educators, teachers, students themselves, parents, and as well as clinical faculty, social social workers, counselors, psychologists, and that sort of thing. So I am really excited and very pleased to be here talking about cyberbullying and digital media use. This is a topic that I am really passionate about, especially I was passionate about this topic before COVID-19 occurred, and now that we had several years where we were almost entirely online, and we are just sort of seeing the rates in which our youth, as well as ourselves as adults, the rates that we spend online just increasing exponentially, and those rates are really here to stay. And so I think that this topic is just so important, now more than ever. So I will get into a little bit of my learning objectives here. One other thing that I will add is that I am a school psychologist by training, and so I did work as a school psychologist for several years in the Chicagoland area before becoming a faculty member and working in academia at the university level. And so I tend to always sort of have that perspective on in terms of school-based services and supports, as well as just thinking sort of like a psychologist. And so I will just sort of add that before getting into my presentation here. But I'm hoping that by the time that the presentation is over, I'm hoping that you'll have developed some awareness about digital and social media use and cyberbullying. I hope that you'll feel a bit more empowered to guide your child or adolescent in their digital worlds, learn what to do if problems do arise in these online spaces, and also know where to access resources following the presentation. So I'll just start by just posing a question, and I just want to take maybe a couple seconds just for you to think about, what is the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the term social media? So just take a second to maybe just think about what comes to mind when you hear the term social media. So maybe you're thinking about your own self, maybe using social media. Maybe you're thinking about your child or your students, using social media. Maybe the first thing that comes to mind is maybe it's rather negative. Maybe you think about your child being sort of sucked into this social media world and feeling like they get rather irritable or maybe grumpy, and it's hard to really kind of pry them away from, some of these social media apps. Maybe you think about, some more positive aspects. So maybe you've seen your child being able to use social media to connect maybe with their friends. So whether that's friends through their school, maybe it's friends that are outside of their school, but maybe it allows your child to access support, maybe support that they would have not otherwise been able to access. Maybe it's being able to access resources or other sort of helpful things. So kind of depending on what kind of first comes to mind, when you hear that term sort of social media. I think social media has gotten a really bad reputation. I think many of us, when we think about social media, especially when we think about social media in terms of our youth, I think we often go to the negative. And I think that's absolutely warranted, and I'll spend a lot of time talking about that, particularly as it relates to cyberbullying tonight. But I'm also going to talk a little bit about some of the positive aspects of social media as well. So I'll start with some background knowledge, some background information about just digital technology use and how our children are sort of using digital technology use kind of on average now, and how this has sort of changed in recent years. So we know from nationally representative samples across the U.S., we know that 8 to 12-year-olds, which is, you might hear or see in the PowerPoint, this age range kind of being called like the tween or like the pre-adolescent range. We know that these youth are using digital technology about, on average, 5 hours per day, and that's excluding time spent for school and or homework. And then we also know that 13 to 17-year-olds, so those adolescents or those teens, are spending about 8 hours per day. Again, that's excluding time spent for school or homework. Now, some of that time could be multitasking, so some of those 5 hours a day could be texting while also watching a video on YouTube, right? So it might not be, exactly 5 hours a day in addition to school and homework and that sort of thing, but that's sort of on average. We have seen, not surprising, but we have seen a really big increase in the amount of time that our youth are spending online during and since COVID-19. So when we look at the increases in media use before COVID-19, we saw about like a 3% jump from year to year, right? So we have seen, really since 2013, 2014, kind of this slow increase in digital media use. If you look at the jump from about 2019 to 2020, 2020 to 2021, we saw that increase be about 17%. So we saw this kind of slow and steady increase, and then all of a sudden we saw this huge increase, obviously very likely due to the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the big increases that we've seen since the pandemic is the use of digital media, particularly social media, with our younger adolescents, that 8 to 12-year-old range. So we now see about 38% of 8 to 12-year-olds using social media, despite that many social media apps do not allow these youth to be on or have an account. There is a law in place, I'll talk about that later, but you have to be at least 13 years of age in order to have a social media account. Of course, many of our children and pre-adolescents are bypassing those rules and laws. But we have sort of seen this really big increase in our younger kiddos, right, using this social media. And then there's a huge question and a little bit of controversy about this relationship between social media use and our kids' mental health, right? And so I think, the big sort of question is like, how is this youth impacting our kids' mental health? Are we seeing some of these increases in anxiety and depression and other things? Are they a result of this the 17% jump, right, that I mentioned? Is it a result, right, of this big sort of increase in social media use? And, the question is not, or the answer to that question is really quite complex. And a bit nuanced. And, we used to think about the time spent online as being a pretty big risk factor for mental health challenges, depression, anxiety. But now what we're seeing is, what is actually more important than the amount of time that our kids are spending online, but it's actually what they're doing online. So what are they doing? Who are they talking to? What kind of content are they exposed to? Are they interacting with friends and peers who are really positive, or are they interacting with friends and peers that are really negative? Are they being exposed to antisocial content or other sort of aggressive content? Are they using social media to access social support, use social support, be interactive with their friends, or are they going on and sort of just passively kind of scrolling, right? The research is pretty clear that the more that we are more passive on social media, so again, that's where we're scrolling and we're not really commenting, posting, maybe interacting with our friends, that type of youth tends to be associated a bit more with depression. A lot of those things due to things like fear of missing out, or maybe comparing themselves to their friends, or maybe they're seeing their friends, do things online or do things and then posting those pictures online, and they weren't there, right? They're not a part of that picture. But if they're using social media to share pictures and communicate and interact, really a lot of that is associated with perceptions of social support, and that can be a really positive thing. So it's certainly more complex than just, the number of hours that your kids are spending online. So I do encourage parents to think about that. We are often very worried, and with good reason. I'll talk a little bit more about, limiting screen media use and that sort of thing. But I would encourage parents to think one step further than, just being worried and concerned about the number of hours that our kids are kind of behind their devices, right? but also thinking about what they're doing on those devices and what are they using, those devices for, and having those conversations with their kids to find out what they're doing, who they're talking with, do they enjoy being online and, on social media, and things like that. And I'll talk more about those conversations. We also get asked a lot about, where cyberbullying occurs, for example, and I'm going to talk more about cyberbullying. But the answer to that is that cyberbullying, as well as any other, negative, online behavior, harassment, that sort of thing, all of those things are going to happen wherever our kids are online, especially if they're on apps or games that adults tend to not be on. So many of us are probably fairly familiar with, an app or a platform might be really popular among our youth. And then adults start to join it, and then you start to see the popularity of that app start to decline, right, among our kids. And so we saw that with Facebook, and then we saw that with Twitter, and then we saw that with Instagram. We're seeing that a little bit with like Snapchat. And now we might be seeing it soon with TikTok. So there's like this trend where our kids are like, oh, now my mom, right, is on Facebook. I'm not going to be on Facebook anymore. And then they have these apps that are sort of popular. And so I like this graph that is shown on this PowerPoint. And so this is again, from a nationally representative sample across the U.S., and it just shows the trends over time on U.S. teens' favorite social platform. And it starts with spring of 2015, and then the most recent data is from spring of 2022. And so you can just see sort of the decline, right, in Facebook and Twitter. Those are those two bottom lines. You see the popularity of Instagram be pretty level, right, since 2015 to currently. And then Snapchat, we saw sort of an increase, and now we're kind of seeing it start to level out. But then you see this huge increase in TikTok. And so many of us probably remember at the start of the pandemic, TikTok becoming really popular. So if you look at the graph, you can see spring of 2020, about 13% of teens indicated that TikTok was their favorite social media platform. That's about the time, right, that COVID-19 hit, and then we're seeing this huge increase in popularity of TikTok. It is currently has surpassed Snapchat in its popularity, and I'm assuming it will stay fairly popular for a while, except that now many of us are now on TikTok, and so I would imagine we're going to start to see that decline. One app that's not mentioned on here is YouTube, but we also know that YouTube is the most popular app currently. About 95% of our youth use YouTube, and many of our youth are on YouTube constantly. So I would say between YouTube and TikTok, those tend to be sort of really at the top in terms of frequency of use and popularity of use. So I just wanted to mention a little bit, again, this is just from the Pew Research Center. They surveyed adolescents just about sort of some of the good and the bad. And you can see that, about 81% felt that using social media, they felt that it allowed them to be more connected with their friends' lives. 69% thought it allowed them to interact with more diverse groups of people. 68% felt more supported through tough times. So really positive things, right, that social media can really allow us to do and allow our youth and our kids to feel when they're online. Excuse me. On the other side of things, about 45%, a little bit less than half, felt that they just were overwhelmed, right? When they go on, when they go on Instagram, they feel overwhelmed by the drama. 43% felt pressure to post content to look good, and 37% felt pressure to post content for likes and comments. So absolutely, many of our kids are sort of feeling some of these things. What I like about this is that we're seeing more of the majority are indicating there are some really positive things, right? That it really allows me to feel connected with my friends, but yet, obviously there's going to be some of that drama and some of that pressure to post content, that pressure to get those likes and those comments. And then sort of similar, again, this is from the Pew Research Center survey of adolescents. 71% of adolescents felt included using social media, 25% felt excluded, 69% felt confident, 26% felt insecure, 64% felt that they could be authentic, while 33% felt that they had to be fake. 61% felt outgoing, and then 34% felt like they sort of had to be reserved in these online spaces. So again, this is just showing the good and the bad, but just really showing that really a majority of our kids do feel, really positive things, right, when they're online. Excuse me. So let's talk a little bit about cyberbullying. And so when you look at the more traditional definition of cyberbullying, it's really considered willful and repeated harm inflicted through the use of computers, cell phones, or other electronic devices. When we think about the definition or conceptualization of cyberbullying, it often aligns with that of traditional bullying or regular bullying. So bullying that might occur in person, through physical means, through relational means, through verbal means. When we think about bullying, we tend to think about three main characteristics. The first, there is some sort of power differential between the person that is engaging in the bullying behavior and then the person that is experiencing it, right? That's sort of on the receiving end. That power differential can be looked at in many different ways. It could be social status, it could be the support from adults or support from other peers. It could be that the person is more, technology savvy. It could be physical nature, the person is larger maybe, but there's a lot of different ways that power differential can be, can be looked at. The second characteristic is that it's repeated or there's a high likelihood of it being repeated. And so just because maybe something happens either online or in person, it happens one time but then doesn't happen again. But if that person is scared that it's going to happen again, if that person changes their behavior, so if they no longer take the bus to school, if they no longer walk that way to school, if they no longer use that app, because they're afraid that they're going to be harassed or victimized online. That doesn't mean that it wasn't bullying, but that person had to change their behavior in order for that bullying behavior to stop. And the third, and what I think is probably the most important characteristic, is that victim feels distress as a result of that behavior. And so that is, I think, by far one of the most important things that we can do is take our kids seriously, when they feel stressed about something or distressed about something. I think we used to take some of these characteristics and we would say, I don't really think that's bullying behavior, and figure it out on your own. And I think in some scenarios, I think that's okay. But just because something isn't bullying doesn't mean that we as adults can't help that child. And so thinking about through those characteristics, research does show that bullying behavior that meets all three of those characteristics tends to result in more negative outcomes for our kids. However, if we have a student or we have a kiddo that is distressed by some form of, mean behavior, we certainly want to sit down and problem solve that with our child. And we'll talk more about that. I have on this slide just a couple of different sort of forms of cyberbullying just to be aware of. And if you're having a hard time seeing the PowerPoint, if you're online, I will be able to send the slides, and so you'll be able to see them a bit better on either a later recording. Flaming and trolling is where you have someone that is posting like really insulting remarks or something really vulgar in order to get a rise out of someone. Photoshopping or tagging or on-tagging, so that might be editing a picture to make it really embarrassing for someone. It might be tagging someone in a photo that they purposely were excluded from, so you know that they're going to see that photo. Or it could be tagging them in a really embarrassing photo. Outing and trickery is where you might have someone that tricks someone into sharing sensitive information, and then that information is then shared publicly. Online harassment and threats might be something that's a little bit more direct. identity theft or impersonation. And then denigration might be something like spreading rumors or other things to sort of damage somebody's social status or somebody's social relationships. A couple of quick facts about both bullying and cyberbullying. We've kind of seen consistently that more traditional forms of bullying have been actually more prevalent than cyberbullying. So about 22% of 12 to 18-year-olds experience bullying, and about 16% report experiencing cyberbullying. That prevalence rate of 16% tends to vary kind of depending on the time range that you ask, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit next in the next slide, but we do see that prevalence rates for cyberbullying tend to range a little bit between like 13 to 15% up to about like 40%, so kind of depending on the survey and how we're asking that question. Some really good news is that traditional forms of bullying have decreased over the past 10 years. So about 28% prevalence in 2009 to 22% more recently. And I really just contribute that to the amount of awareness and just the amount of work and dedication that our families, our schools, and communities have really dedicated to bullying awareness as well as bullying prevention and intervention. That being said, and this is probably not very surprising, but we have seen a slight increase in rates of cyberbullying over the past couple years, about the past 5 years. And less than half, about 46% of students who experience bullying report it to an adult. And I would say even less than that percentage there. If a student is experiencing cyberbullying, they're even less likely to report it to an adult. This is just a graph that shows the prevalence rates over time for cyberbullying, and this is from the Cyberbullying Research Center. And so you can see this bar graph starts in 2007, and then the most recent data is from April of 2021. And so this particular graph, they asked students, again, a large sample across the United States. They asked students if they experienced cyberbullying in the past 30 days. And so you can see this slight increase from about 12% in 2014 to about 23% in 2021. And that you can see that steady increase right there over the past couple of years. They also asked whether youth had ever experienced in their lifetime cyber victimization, and that prevalence rate in April 2021, that was actually up to about 45-46%. So a little bit under half of our adolescents have ever experienced cyber victimization in their lifetime. This particular graph on this slide shows just in the past 30 days. So in the past 30 days, about 23% of adolescents reported that they've experienced cyber victimization. And then I did just want to note that we see a really large overlap in our kids that are involved in traditional forms of bullying and cyberbullying. So I will say that it is quite rare for a child or adolescent to be involved in just cyberbullying. I would say less than about 5% of kids are really just only involved in these things online and not involved in them in person. We typically see kids that maybe struggle with social skills or maybe struggle with peer conflict, and those that are sort of struggling with in-person relationships, right, tend to also be the kids and adolescents that struggle with these things online. And so it's so important to really kind of set the foundation for a really solid, so healthy social emotional development, social emotional learning skills sort of in person. And then in many cases, we tend to see those skills also translate online. We don't really see these kids that are sort of one person in person or at school, right? And then just somebody completely different online. We tend to see, kind of very similar things across, in person and sort of online. And really when we think about online and sort of being in person, these things are not separate, right, for our kids. And for many cases, it's not separate for us as adults either. We don't tend to think about like, well, I'm online right now, as opposed to, not online. And so it's just things that are sort of diffused throughout our lives and our kids' lives. And so we tend to see a strong overlap, right, in terms of those that might be involved in victimization, in terms of like traditional forms and then cyberbullying. And then kind of interesting, some recent research that I just wanted to mention somewhat briefly. It's pretty reliable and pretty consistent that our kids and adolescents that are involved in cyber victimization, that experience cyber victimization, we see these negative outcomes, right? So we see these kids reporting greater levels of depression, anxiety, behavior problems, more likely to be substance use or engaging in substance abuse. And we see this tend to be kind of a pretty strong relationship, right? And also the more that our children are experiencing this victimization, the higher levels of depression, anxiety, behavioral problems, right, that they're going to be reporting or experiencing. But I will say that some recent research, some rigorous longitudinal studies that have looked at and followed youth over time have also found that kids that are maybe struggling a bit, right, with depression or anxiety, or struggling a bit with behavioral problems, these kids are more likely to be at risk for experiencing cyber victimization and or perpetrating victimization online. And so thinking about, especially at a younger age, if we think about some of our kids that maybe are struggling just a little bit with some of these mental health challenges, maybe struggling a little bit about like social problem solving and just trying to figure out how to be a good friend and figuring out those peer relationships. It's those kids that might be more at risk for some of this online victimization and harassment. And so we should really try to have a lot of these conversations about healthy online behavior, as early as possible for all of our kids, but especially for some of our kids that might be struggling in some of these areas. And then, cyberbullying can be quite persistent and can be really tricky to prevent and intervene with for a variety of different reasons. One is that the person that's engaging in the bullying behavior can be anonymous. There tends to be pretty low adult supervision. In school, if we know that bullying behavior is happening, in many cases we could try to increase, right, that adult supervision in the hallway, in the cafeteria, that sort of thing. But it's really hard to increase that adult presence or supervision in many of these online spaces. We also see lower rates of bystander intervention. And what I mean by bystander intervention is that other kids are less likely to support and stick up for their friends online than they are in person. And there's a variety of different reasons for that. If you ask kids, they want to help, and they want to be able to help their friends and their classmates if they find that they're in a tricky situation online. But it's not so clear cut in online spaces, right? It's a little bit unclear about whether the person that's maybe experiencing the victimization and harassment, how distressed are they? Is this part of a joke? If I stand up for this person, how many people are going to see that? It's a little bit higher of a risk. And so there's a lot of different factors involved. And so we see our kids just sticking up for their friends a little bit less in these online spaces than they tend to be doing in person. And then there's low rates of reporting. So kids are less likely to tell an adult. So whether that's a teacher, whether that's a neighbor, a parent, but they're just less likely to tell an adult if they're experiencing online harassment compared to if they're experiencing bullying behavior. I will say that there tends to be low rates of reporting overall. Kids often say that it's not very helpful, or they're not being taken seriously, and so the more that we can figure out, how to help our kids in a lot of these situations, and the more they know that they're not going to get in trouble and they're not going to get privileges taken away, they're not going to get their device taken away, the more likely they will to come to us. And that also really coincides with having a lot of these conversations early, even before your child maybe gets a smartphone. And I'll talk more about that. And then I will just mention briefly that we do see this increase in cyberbullying around the same time that we see this autonomy with devices. So about 50% of 8 to 12-year-olds say that their parents know what they say and do online, versus about 26% of adolescents, so ages 12 and up, about 26% of those adolescents indicate that their parents, know what they see or do online. So that parent monitoring definitely decreases right from that age range, from that sort of pre-adolescent to adolescent age range, which makes complete sense. However, that's also when we start to see some of these increases in victimization and harassment. And then I'll just mention, we've received a lot of questions about how COVID-19 has impacted bullying and cyberbullying, and whether we saw this huge increase in cyberbullying. So I did report earlier that we have seen this sort of steady increase in cyberbullying, in the past 5 years. During COVID-19, we actually saw a decrease in more of those traditional forms of bullying. And there's many reasons for that, right? So there were a lot less social situations for bullying to occur. There were less students in the classroom. For students that were in the classroom, they were physically distanced. There was more of an adult presence. A variety of different reasons for why bullying decreased. But we also saw rates of cyberbullying in many of these studies. They either stayed about the same, slightly decreased, or sort of slightly increased. And so I do think that's important to note. So even though we saw that huge increase in media use among our youth, so we saw that 17% jump, right, in media use, we did not see that same jump in rates of cyberbullying. And I think that just goes to show that many of our kids are able to use media, and they're able to be on social media very responsibly. Even if they're on their devices, sort of all the time, it's just kind of up to us to really help them set some of that good foundation. So let's talk about, prevention. And so, we really want to have these conversations, early and often. And again, so the average age that our kids are getting smartphones now is about the age of 10, if not earlier. So have these conversations, if possible, before your child gets their smartphone. And choose your timing. So maybe it's during car rides, maybe it's out to dinner. There's a variety of different questions that you can ask, your child about their media use. So just asking what apps they're into, right? What do you use them for? Just asking them how they work, right? Can you show me how that works? Or what do you think? Or do you think the messages ever really disappear? And sort of trying to get an understanding of where they're at. I have some sample questions on that slide. There's also other great resources that have a variety of different sample questions, as well as scripts for how to engage in some of this dialogue with your child. And so the Cyberbullying Research Center provides some of these guides. They provide sample questions for parents to ask about technology use, those scripts. And then Children and Screens is a really great organization that not only provides some of these guides and resources. I have a link here on this PowerPoint, how to talk to kids about online meanness and cyberbullying that go through a lot of different points. But Children and Screens, they also have an Ask the Expert series, which is a free webinar that they provide on I'm not sure, I think it might be a monthly or so basis, but you can follow them on social media to stay up to date on some of their events, as well as Cyberbullying Research Center. You can stay up to date on many of their events as well. But I have a bullet point on this slide, so try to provide thoughtful guiding principles about appropriate media use. And so it's helpful to have and be engaged in some of these conversations with our kids, just about some of these rules and expectations, and having these conversations, and even if possible, sort of coming up with rules and guidelines together can be the most helpful for many of our kids. And then also just trying to help develop some of these protective factors. And so I have some of these factors on the slide, and these factors have been shown to help buffer against some of the negative outcomes of cyberbullying, and they've also been shown to help prevent future cyberbullying as well. So just trying to promote and boost kids' self-esteem, social competence, emotion stress management, low levels of technology use, providing that parental support and warmth, and encouraging them to be, interacting with positive peers and just really promoting some of that peer support. And then within the school and community level, having this perception of a safe and positive school climate, and then perceptions of a safe neighborhood or a safe adult in the neighborhood. And then in thinking about some of these guidelines, so trying to decide, maybe as a family, when and how to use devices. And so maybe there's certain parts of the day that devices are not allowed. So maybe it's at the dinner table. Maybe it's right before bed. Maybe it's during, a family event, or maybe like a daily sort of family outing or something like that. But just deciding when is appropriate and not appropriate to use that device, and then just being consistent and sticking with that guideline. Trying to find balanced positive online activities. So are there things that you can do online with your child together? So maybe on game night, maybe you do like an online game, right, as opposed to a board game. And so just trying to find ways to do things together online, so that you as the parent are more involved and a bit more knowledgeable about some of these online behaviors. And then there's a variety of different ways that parents can monitor usage. A lot of these tend to be a lot more helpful when we're thinking about pre-adolescent or sort of early adolescent age range. Things like some of those parent control settings, so like limiting screen time, locking devices, restricting content, and just overall managing privacy settings. I'm just going to show this quick 1-minute video from Common Sense Media about monitoring usage.
Here are 5 cool tools to help kids and parents use phones less and track the time they spend on devices. First up, screen time settings in iOS 12. These allow parents to connect devices through family sharing and manage kids' screen time settings from their own phones. For Android families, the Digital Wellbeing tool sets time limits for individual apps, allows for batch notifications, and has a wind down function for bedtime. If YouTube is more your kid's thing, use the graphing feature to show the time they spent in the app and set up a reminder to take a break. Next, there's Snapchat's Do Not Disturb setting, which allows users to mute notifications from specific people without shutting down the entire app. And finally, for the music obsessed, parents can set password-protected time limits in TikTok so kids can't access the app when their time is up. For more tips, visit us at commonsense.org.
Common Sense Media is a really great resource for parents. They have a variety of different guides for parents on different apps. I have a link to that in a later slide. But Common Sense Media also has great information about if you are concerned maybe about a certain TV show, movie, video, online or social media trend, an app. Maybe you're overhearing either in the news or you're overhearing maybe your child talk about it. Common Sense Media is a great place to go. They'll give you a quick summary about whatever it might be, the TV show, movie, etc. And then being clear about expectations with our children. So just making it clear that an electronic device, right, it's a privilege. Only installing social media apps or games only with parental approval. And so again, that children's online privacy protection rule, so must be 13 or older for sites to collect that private information, which is why many of our sites only allow youth over the age of 13 to have an account. Making it very clear very early on that we do not share our user account names or passwords with anyone except for our parents. Having a common area in the house that you charge all of your phones, right? So maybe there is, all phones go into a drawer to be charged overnight so that they are out of the bedrooms. And so just, again, figuring out what that looks like, when device use is allowed and not allowed throughout the family time and in the house, and then just being very clear about that. Cyberbullying Research Center, they have a technology use contract. It's quite lengthy. However, I do think it's a good resource if you feel like having everything sort of written out in a contract would be helpful for your child. You can take a look at that. But sometimes I think some of these things just written out on a piece of paper that's stuck up on the fridge is, can be just as effective. And then just, the three tips for posting 3 Fs, right? So family, only post things that you are willing for a parent or other family member to see or know about. Forever, assume whatever you share is permanent. And then freely available, assume no privacy. When you ask our kids, they tend to know, they're like, yes, we know if we share something online that it's not, we know that if it gets deleted, it's still there, right? If you ask kids, many kids know this already. But just having that reminder, I think, is really important, especially for many of our kids that can be really impulsive online and posting things. Just having some of these things as a reminder and talking through some of these things early on, consistent, can be particularly helpful. And then I had mentioned earlier the Common Sense Media has parent guides about different apps. Internet Matters also has an apps guide, and then the Cyberbullying Research Center, they also have a guide on the most popular social media apps. I know that parents don't have time to sit down and read through all these guides. I will say that Common Sense Media also has a quick videos on each different app, and so those can be helpful as well. But I just encourage you, if you're concerned about a certain app or a certain thing, check these out, and that I'm sure there'll be a reference to whatever it is that you might be concerned about. I'm just going to show, this is a quick example from Common Sense Media on Parents Guide to TikTok.
What is TikTok? It's a social network dedicated to short, self-made music videos. You can record yourself lip-syncing to popular songs, share your own musical creations, remix titles, or browse other people's work. Okay, no surprises here, but kids love to get their groove on using this app. TikTok has cool filters, speed adjustments, and a duet function specifically for friends in other places. As fun as it is, though, there are a few things to watch out for. Because it uses real music, you can find lots of iffy song lyrics and performances that include swearing and sexual content. And if you don't want the world to see your video, it's a good idea to adjust the privacy and safety settings and select Private Account. To check out our full review of TikTok, visit us at commonsense.org.
So again, there is a variety of different types of videos, and again, 1 to 2 minute long that hopefully you'll have time to look at if you're concerned about something. And then again, thinking about prevention. So when you're having these conversations with your child about what they're interested in online, who they're talking to, and can you show me these things, try and talk to them about sort of just being prepared. It's very likely that your child will at some point maybe experience harassment, or at least see somebody else, right, experience harassment. So having a plan in place, or talking through a plan before it gets to them actually experiencing some of this. So what should your child do if they experience or witness cyberbullying? And so asking them that, what would you do in this situation? And then talk through some of these things. So making sure they know to document it. So take a screenshot of it. Making sure they have somebody that they can reach out to for support. So if they don't feel comfortable, right, going to you as the parent for support, is there somebody else that they can go to for support? Is there a favorite teacher, that they can talk to? Is there an aunt or an uncle? Is there even a positive peer can be really helpful and effective in some of these things. And then reporting it. So do they know how to report it to the platform, right? So if they're experiencing victimization on TikTok, do they know how to report it? And so maybe together that can be an activity that you can do together, is kind of figuring out how to report it on some of the popular apps that your child is on. But also, do they feel comfortable reporting it to a teacher? Do they feel comfortable reporting it, to somebody else? So just talking through some of those things. And then one of the most, and then this has a Connect Safely as well as cyberbullying.org. They have great guides on how to report instances of cyberbullying and harassment across different media platforms. I would say, though, one of the most important things is making sure that your child knows that their device won't be taken away if they do tell an adult. So many of us are not sure, right, how to deal with cyberbullying, and so if our kid is involved, then we might be like, okay, well, I'm just going to take away your phone or whatever, and then it won't happen anymore. So just making sure that they know that that won't happen and that you are somebody that is safe and that they can talk to you about this. And then just also kind of talking about using some of those stress reduction, emotion management strategies that they use in person, but also using them in that online space. So using the off switch. So if they see something online that upsets them, try not to respond. When we respond in the moment, we are much more likely to be a target of further victimization and harassment. So teaching them to take a deep breath, for example, maybe walking away, maybe logging off, closing your device, taking a breather, practicing some of these things, knowing some of these strategies, take a couple minutes, and then if they feel like they still need to respond, maybe talking it through again with a peer or another adult or something like that, but just taking the time to think through some of the responses. And then just a couple of warning signs to look out for if you feel concerned that your child may be experiencing cyber victimization. So if you have a child that maybe unexpectedly stops using their devices or suddenly starts using their devices really excessively, right? So either kind of this sort of sudden change in behavior, either with stopping using their device or all of a sudden they're just constantly on their phone and you can't sort of pry them away from their phone. If they kind of appear nervous or irritable when they kind of receive some of these messages or notifications on their phone, or if they just kind of appear upset or angry, during or after using their device. If they really avoid discussions about their online activities, or if they become unusually withdrawn from friends or family members. So I want to talk, I'm going to take the next few minutes here just to talk through some of these things about how we as parents or how we as adults can respond effectively if and when our child does talk to us about some of these things that they're experiencing online. And so many youth report that adults make things better by listening, by checking in and giving advice, and that we tend to make things worse when we say things like, stop tattling, solve it yourself, or saying like, well, if you acted differently, this wouldn't have happened, right? So kind of some of that victim blaming, right? But really sort of listening and checking in with them is really helpful. Some effective strategies that were reported from 9 to 12-year-olds, they said that blocking the person was really helpful, telling a parent was helpful, ignoring the person, reporting it to the website or app, walking away or taking a break, telling the school, talking to the person doing the cyberbullying, and then about 2% said that nothing worked. And then one thing that I do want to note, and this came from a study from 2019, but youth that were told or reminded themselves that it was not their fault, so it was not their fault that they were being harassed or victimized, that was the most helpful coping strategy in reducing emotional distress following bullying situations. And so I would highly recommend that if somebody comes to you, if a child comes to you and says that they're experiencing harassment, number one is just reminding them this, right? That this is not, this is 100% not your fault, and let's sort of figure out, how to go from here. Again, a couple of things just to keep in mind when we think about recommending strategies. So making sure that we're saving the evidence, that they're taking a break, that they're blocking or muting the person, that they're telling somebody, and that they're reporting the incident. And then I like to end by just kind of talking about 3 really important ways that we can support our child when they come to us, if they are experiencing some of these things. So number 1 is listen and find out more. So we as adults talk a lot, and so just stopping, ourselves and just sort of listening through, and just, tell me what happened. And then supporting them, right? So empathizing with their feelings, trying not to minimize. and then let them take the lead with problem solving. So know that there's no single quick fix, but asking them, okay, how can I help in this situation? It's often not helpful when we as adults become angry or upset. It can be really distressing if our child is telling us that they are experiencing this. We get really upset about it, right? But this is not the time to show that. We need to show and model how to problem solve in very rational ways, and sort of letting them take the lead. It often is not helpful if, as adults, we sort of go over our child's head and immediately contact other parents or immediately contact the school, but again, making sure that our child is okay with some of these strategies. And then I did want to just mention this really great resource from PACER's National Bullying Prevention Center. They have a Working with the School resource, and they go through and they provide really excellent strategies and details about how to partner with the school if your child is experiencing bullying and cyberbullying. So it just talks about how to set up and prepare for a meeting, how to go about record keeping and then reporting some of that, developing an action plan together with the school, and then just overall becoming involved with bullying prevention and intervention practices if that's something that is of interest to the parent. So I highly encourage parents to check out this really great resource. And then a couple just other resources, and then I'll end here. We at the Alberti Center have lots of resources on our website for parents, and we do have a section dedicated to cyberbullying and internet safety. And then I put in some of these other resources, many of which I have addressed earlier in the presentation. I will mention the Google Be Internet Awesome Family Guide and the Google Digital Wellbeing Family Guide. Those are really great guides. They have various scenarios that if you're interested in working through different scenarios as a family, those are great ones to check out. So thank you so much for having me come and talk about this. I will just mention that we at the Alberti Center, we are on social media, so feel free to stay connected and follow us across all of these different apps. So thank you.
So thank you so much. That was such great information that I know all of our families will be so happy and thankful to have. And certainly at home, as a reminder, we will put this up on our website shortly. So if you have some neighbors and friends who weren't able to attend this evening, rest assured you can share that will be forthcoming. So I hope you don't mind. We had a few questions from the audience and from some parents. If you'd mind taking a few questions.
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
Happy to take some questions.
All right, first question. I feel overwhelmed with all this new social media that my children are experiencing, and I cannot keep up with the latest of what is happening using my own technology. How can I continue to help support my child when I feel like I still do not understand what is happening on social media? So I know oftentimes our kids are sometimes way many steps ahead of us, and it's an extra job just to keep ahead of them. So
yes.
What should someone do in that situation?
Yeah, so I would highly recommend that parents follow some of the organizations that I have recommended in my presentation. So Children and Screens, Cyberbullying Research Center, the Alberti Center, I would highly recommend, I'm going to go back here to this slide here, PACER's National Bullying Prevention Center. So following some of these on social media, and then you'll get sort of these up-to-date information. The Cyberbullying Research Center, they actually do blogs. So if there's like a social media trend, they'll post about that. So I would recommend doing that first and foremost. And then second, just asking our kids, about their involvement in some of these things. I don't think parents need to take, an extensive amount of time and doing research and that sort of thing, but just talking with kids and following some of these resources, I think, is enough.
That's fantastic. Next question. What if I notice these signs of cyberbullying, yet my child still will not talk to me? Do I still push through and continue to try and talk?
Yeah, so this one's a bit tricky. I tend to recommend, especially the psychologist kind of in me, so I recommend that, again, we're going to allow our child to take the lead. And so I would say as a parent, you would want to, periodically continue to check in, let your child know that you're available, that you're someone that is very happy, to talk to them, and that you're safe. Whenever they're ready, you're available to talk, and just kind of consistently remind them of that. And then if and when they're ready, let them sort of talk, kind of on their own time.
That's great. 2 more questions I have. Since it seems that social media and technology are increasing, do I need to be monitoring more severely my child's use of technology and online presence?
Yeah, so I think that's going to be on a case-by-case scenario. So I would think that if you feel like your child is able to engage in media use responsibly, if they're able to show responsibility in other aspects of their life, and they're able to sort of follow guidelines and rules, then I say we trust our kids in many of these online spaces. However, if you feel like your child might be, more one to sort of push limits, not be able to be responsible in other things, maybe you look at some of those privacy settings or other ways to monitor your child's cell phone if you feel that that's warranted.
Yeah, that's great. It certainly goes back to what you said about if you all of a sudden notice that your child is either pulling away from their device or excessively using their device
Yes.
when they weren't before. Like a big change is certainly a red flag for sure.
Absolutely.
Okay, the last question I had from our viewers was, it seems that a lot of research is based on older children. Should I begin being more aware if my child is younger, let's say 1st through 3rd grade?
Yes. I actually think it's ideal to have these conversations, the earlier the better. So if we can start to have these conversations as soon as our kids are behind screens and behind devices. And so I think ideal age in many cases is like 7, 8, 9 years of age before we're giving our kids some of these devices.
Yeah, certainly all great advice that we certainly can all put to use, and some tips and tricks of the trade. And Dr. Fredrick, it was a pleasure having you here tonight and sharing your expertise and your research and your wealth of knowledge with us and our families and our district. So we thank you so much again. We really appreciate you coming here.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
And thank you again for everyone viewing tonight. We wish you all the best. Drive safe home, and we'll see you soon.